So Mary said that she's going to be probably about a half an hour late. She comes back from media. She babysits her grandchildren on Tuesdays.
Luckily.
She'll join us as soon as she can.
Sorry, my mother's talking to the evening news.
Uh-oh.
Okay, we're streaming.
Okay. Well, okay, I might as well get started. We can get started with the conversation. I wanted to finish a conversation that we started at our last meeting about putting into the comprehensive plan about doing a referendum for an increase in our EIT tax for open space. It kind of was brought up, Barry nicely brought it up. It's a good conversation that we should have. And I think that we need as a task force to come to a decision whether we are going to have it in the plan or not. It's a very sensitive subject. It was tried twice before. It was tried when we had a huge project in front of us where Kathy's farm is now, was going to be TND, and we were fighting with the developers and wanted to preserve it in open space. And the township did not have enough money to do their 50% of the funding with Chester County. And so we tried twice to pass the referendum, and both times it failed. As a little background, you also probably will remember that the high school, the school district, also tried to pass an EIT tax, and it also failed in a referendum. So, you know, our residents are not receptive to tax increases, which I certainly understand. I think it's a very serious topic that we need to discuss, because we did not have any questions in our survey with the residents about taxes at all. When we did the survey back in 2004, there were lots of questions about tax increases because we were just starting our open space program at that time. So my number one concern is not so much about the tax, because I do understand what Barry was saying, and I do agree that most of our residents are already paying that tax and it's going to another municipality. However, I do believe that without the residents' support on that type of tax, I feel like the comprehensive plan task force is beating and switching a little bit, saying that, oh, you want open space? Well, you know, we need to increase taxes. I'd like to also talk about in the actual plan, there's the word, when we talk about funding, the word leverage is used. And I think the leverage can go a couple ways. We can leverage our funding by using grants, but leverage funding can also mean a loan, which also means an increase in taxes. So just a quick background on EIT tax. There's two ways that you can raise the EIT tax. One, the supervisors can, when they go and they investigate what their budget is for the next year, they, for the general fund, can increase their EIT tax by doing a resolution. It's got nothing to do with a referendum on the ballot. It's got nothing to do with open space. It's in the general fund, and therefore it could be used for any expense, including open space. So if you do an EIT tax for open space only, it has to be a referendum that's put on the ballot. The way it's put on the ballot is the Board of Supervisors votes, and the majority says, yes, we want to do a referendum. There's a public hearing, and the referendum goes on the ballot, and the folks vote on it for yes or no. So that being said, so my feeling, quite frankly, is that seeing I went through it twice, I was enthusiastic about having the EIT tax for all the reasons that we spoke about, that people are paying it anyways, unless they work in Kemblesville. I do feel now that this particular board has got their handle on the expenses, and that they can, for the remaining projects, be able to fund open space through using the current budget, is what I'm trying to say. So I'd like to open it up for conversation. I guess there's Barry, there's Kathy, there's Chuck, and Dave. I think that's all. That's all the squares I have. Is that all you have?
Nan, I would like, can I just clear something up
Yeah,
first
sure.
that was said?
Yeah.
The EIT tax we currently have is assessed on anyone who either lives or works in Franklin Township. So even if you work outside of Franklin, you work someplace else that collects EIT tax, our tax comes back to us.
Right.
The only tax we do not benefit from are for people who work in Delaware, because there's no reciprocal agreement. So the state lets you apply the excess Delaware tax against your EIT tax. Pennsylvania does that. And we do have a reciprocal agreement with Maryland. So,
It's a
we
wash.
lose out on that.
Yeah.
But everybody else who lives in Franklin Township, or if they only work here, we do get their EIT tax.
Unless you're in the military.
Military, yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to pay
Or-
EIT tax if you're in the military.
Or Philly. You don't get Philly's money. They're going to
Well,
take your money.
That's because you have the city wage tax that you put against the EIT tax here. That's how.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's
Kind of
correct.
similar
Can
to
I share,
Delaware.
can I
I-
share a number with the, I think I can share a screen still because I don't think anyone's taken over. So I'm going to take a risk and try that. But that's the graph for where we stand. Right? So we're really way down here at, there's only a few townships below us, 5 exactly, or 6. So
Well, actually, Barry, I looked at it myself. I came up with a different thing. I said that 40%, I went online, Joan helped me do it, and I came up with 39% resident EIT tax have a higher EIT than we do in Chester County. So there's 2 ways for the EIT tax. If you, like, for instance, if you're in Westchester, I can look and see what they do, but if you're in Westchester, your residents, you can charge them, a 0.5% EIT, but if you work in Westchester, they can charge you 1%. So I'm not sure with your graph what that is. Is that what they charge non-residents or residents?
that's what they charge as an EIT. So if you go to the municipality site, which I'm sure, Janine, you're very familiar with, they list the EITs for all the school districts and all the townships. And so I just spread those out on a histogram. That's all I did.
But Garrett, what I'm saying is, Barry, there are 2 different ones. Like, for instance, let's take East Kalen. I'm looking at that. Their municipal non-resident EIT tax is 1, but the resident is 0.5. So I looked at resident EIT taxes. And so if you
No,
live there.
I did resident. Yeah, I did resident.
Yeah, well, I did too. So I only came up with 39%. But nevertheless, Barry, you're correct. You're correct. So if you live here in Franklin Township and you go work in East Kalen, right? You'll pay 1%. Half will come back to us and half will stay there.
Okay.
And that was the same thing that we went through when we went door to door. People, it's a complicated topic. They just don't like taxes. And that's a complicated topic that it's difficult to get by.
So Nan, are you suggesting that histogram of the resident EIT is not correct?
Well, unless I'm not correct, because I went through and did resident EIT tax, and I came out of the Chester County municipalities. There's 74. 29 of them have a higher resident EIT tax than we do. So that
Okay,
comes out with 39%.
I'll double check the Excel spreadsheet, which I think I attached to the histogram.
Well,
So-
whatever. I mean, I think it's still the concept. I mean, what do people, keep going, Barry.
Well, I just don't want to, if we're down at, like there's only 10 townships at our level or below, we're really below average, and maybe they have the money now, but with COVID and the economy and things like that, we need to have some safety, especially if people want the luxury of open space. Open space is a luxury. Trails are a luxury.
You
Not-
can't use for the trails. You can't use the that tax for trails and maintenance. You can use it to purchase open space and ag easements.
I understand, but if you're going to have these nice features in Franklin Township, which are their community property per se, right? Then somebody has to pay for them. They don't just come for free. So I would 0.5% seems low. I feel bad I don't pay all of it because I work in Delaware. But yeah, I would be supportive of jumping that up to maybe not the average, which we can talk about, which is on the order of a little over 1%, but maybe close to 3/4 or 1%. I'm fine with that.
Does anybody know when the first 0.5% was added? We used to be at 0.
2005.
Yeah, so I personally used to pay 0. Now I'm paying 0.5. And if we go this route, I will pay the 1.0. So, there are people other than people that live in Kemblesville that will pay additional taxes, and there's other people that won't pay any additional.
So,
Yep.
can I just jump in?
Yeah, go ahead.
So when, I came a few minutes late to this, but one of the things when this was presented to the voters the last time around is not only were the voters asked to do a referendum on the tax, but the voters were voting on a referendum on a tax that would then result in the elimination of a certain amount of real estate taxes as well. And which personally I thought was a good idea, because if you have the income, you can pay it. If you don't have the income and you're retired and you have a lot of land, you weren't going to be taxed. Nonetheless,
Didn't pass.
they were going to eliminate, because that was going to be eliminated, it was soundly rejected.
Yep.
And it led to significant changes in municipal government, which you may approve of or may not have approved of, but led to a different approach that was not particularly pro-open space.
Right.
And I figured out the difference between our two numbers. I included, like Franklin Township does not include an EIT for Avon Grove. Thank God, they already get enough money. But a lot of townships split that up. And so I just did the total EIT, which includes, Janine, you probably know what I'm talking about because you're shaking your head, that I did the total EIT that a person pays in the township. And so that's the difference. So that's history.
Barry, we have nothing to say about the Avon Grove EIT tax. As I mentioned, that was also on the ballot. I don't remember when, and it was soundly, the president said no. So that's something that's a referendum that the school district has to put on. It's got nothing to do with Franklin. Does that make sense?
So the question isn't, if we were to increase the EIT tax, would we get more money to do more, buy more open space? That's a given. The question is, what is it that we want to do with the comp plan? Is this a recommendation that we should include in the comp plan? And so one of the things that was mentioned, regardless of where I fall on the EIT question, is we didn't include that option in any of the surveys. We just said, is open space important to you? And so one could answer that and say, yeah, open space is really important to me. I love the open space in Franklin Township. We didn't then say, well, should we buy the remaining open space that's available via an increase in our EIT tax? So you can say, some people might say, let's buy the rest of the properties that are available. Or we can say, I'm happy the way things are, let's preserve what we have. So, and so that's why it's like, what Barry's saying is true. It would enable us to do more if we were able to have more money. But is it appropriate to put it into a comp plan recommendation when I don't think we dug deep enough in the questioning to support that recommendation?
And not only
That makes sense.
Thank you. Yeah, it does to me. And guys, correct me. I thought we intentionally stayed away from that question in the workshops, right? We wanted to decouple taxes from the open space question. Is that right? Is that my
Yes,
recollection?
that's correct.
Yeah. So it does feel disingenuous then to use the task force, the EIT question aside, but to use the task force as a way to push the EIT question. I am having a hard time plugging the two together as well, the task force and the EIT question.
I think that it should be left up to the supervisors about how they want to support open space. As I said, the referendum is put on the ballot by the supervisors. And if they feel that it's something that's necessary, then that's up to them. The other thing that I'd like to mention is we currently don't have a real open space committee. We have Paul's committee, which does a lot of things. Paul Overton, including open space, but we don't have any large projects on board right now. The last time we did the referendum, Kathy, it was that your property that was going to be the TND, which was huge. And yeah, the developers weren't doing well. And yeah, we wanted to buy them out and we couldn't. Luckily, they just took the half that Chester County offered them. And that's why, what's your bull's name, Mr.?
So Mr. Powers has a
Yes,
home.
he's very happy over there.
Not homeless. Yeah, we're
Yes,
all very
not
happy.
homeless, right?
Yeah, so
So,
I'm
I mean-
glad. Yeah, we came in instead of the EIT tax. So
Yeah, there you go. I mean, I think, Barry, I'm glad that you brought it up. I mean, but I personally think that it doesn't have a place in the comprehensive plan in the next 10 years. If there's a large project that comes up and the supervisors feel that that's the way they want to finance it, then it's up to them to do it and put it on the ballot.
Okay,
Or they could raise the general fund EIT tax and they could take it out of that. Something we should also keep in mind is that when we get finished, the recommendations, which I know we need to get going so we can get finished with them, we have lots of things that we want the supervisors to do. And they may have to increase taxes. They may, people aren't like sweating bullets right now, but they may at some point during the next 10 or 20 years have to look at the tax base and decide what they want to do with these recommendations, of which some of them are open space, some of them are ag preservation, some of them are walkability, some of them are roads. There's lots of things that we are recommending. I think that for all the reasons that we've mentioned, including Dave's idea, which is we did not have it in the survey, and Kathy, you said the same thing, and I did. I do feel like we would be letting the residents down and they would mistrust what we are putting together in the plan.
Well, an idea too, you could think about is, one of the recommendations does say investigate funding for open space and ag land preservation. So
It does. It uses the word leverage. I don't know if we want to leave leverage in there. Leverage to me means a loan. We may want to look at alternatives. We may want to mention grants and that sort of thing. But, leverage
could mean you have a little bit of seed money from the township to leverage a grant. That's how it often happens.
Right. And I understand that. But to a lot of people, it means, a loan or something. I don't know if we want to retool that particular word.
Nan, I was just going to clarify. I appreciate you mentioning all the things that you did because I really wasn't motivated only by open space. I'm just thinking about, okay, David, who pays to maintain the trails that we're going to create? Who pay for the new parking lot?
So you're absolutely right. That's different. That's not an open space EIT. That's just
right. That's right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I was referring when Nan was bringing up all of these things. Who's going to pay for the sewer for an HDR? Because that's still going to be expensive. So I think that we have all these things that we want to do, like even that Nan mentioned, and I was like, this is going to cost money. And that's why I was kind of saying, hey, we don't tax at the rate that the other townships kind of do sometimes. So if we want all these great things, somebody's going to have to pay. And so
yes, so that's absolutely right. And so I think one of the things that we get caught, one of the things that we want to, I should say, avoid, but so the job of the comp plan is to say, this is what our community is asking for. And then it's the job of the elected officials to say, okay, well, this is how we're going to do it. Right. And sometimes that might be to raise taxes. Sometimes it's to reprioritize. And so I think one of the primary ways that we address it is, I think how Nan put it, which was, addressing alternative fund or addressing funding opportunities or funding sources. And that might include taxes, that might include grants, right? And so, that makes so everything you're saying, Barry, it's kind of hard to say is that everything you're saying makes sense, right? But the question isn't necessary, does it make sense? Does this make sense in the comp?
yeah, I get it. It's just a good point to discuss and to say, if we were above average EIT already, then there would be no way we could do all this stuff. We just might as well just pack up and go home. But since we're below average, the township does have some opportunity to expand and grow in these areas that the township, members say, hey, I want this thing. I want that park. I want this. So then we have options. So that's maybe the way to look at it in terms of our document is, well, this is reasonable. You know, we can grow and we can expand in these areas that they're talking about because we're not overtaxed per se.
But I think there's a time and a place for it, and I don't think it's something that we should put into the comprehensive plan. I think it's something as we go forward, working with our elected officials, as we prioritize and we make our list of what we're going to do, then we go in and have conversations with the Board of Supervisors and say, it's our tax dollars. Let's look at the budget together, which happens this time of year, every year. And how can we do it? And they'll say, well, we can do it because we have some excess fund because we don't ever remove snow anymore or whatever. And they can put it towards some of these activities. Because quite frankly, right now, sure, they're going to cost money, but we have no idea how much and which one we're going to work on first and what's going to work. But because we're just in the planning phase. So go ahead.
Some of the items may not cost money, like trails. If we simply push for a trail on the edge of a development, that doesn't cost the township any money. So I mean, but currently it's not in our comp plan, so therefore we don't do it. So there are things that the comp plan we can achieve without spending any money at all.
That's correct. So are we happy to go on now and start to do our priorities so we can get through it with Janine? Everybody's happy with our decisions at this point, which is to not include the EIT tax in the comprehensive plan. So before Janine gets started, I'm going to move on. So when we were talking before, I think we started to expand the number of priority subjects that we can have. So just so you know, in our contract with Chester County, with Janine to do the work, we're only allowed to have 6. And right now we have Campbellsville's village enhancements, agricultural retention, trail and other pedestrian circulation connections, resource protection as green infrastructure, roads and other community infrastructure, and future land use. So those are our 6. So we're going to have to kind of swap around and try to make do with that, or we can relabel one of them with other, but we have to stay with 6. And lastly, I'd like to say, I know we haven't talked about future land use. I've been working with Janine and I have questions that I need to ask because there were 2 documents. One was done by our solicitor in 2018 and one was done, the fair share analysis, which you've all seen, in 2019. And there's lots of questions around them. It was never acted upon. So I hope this week I'll be able to get my answers. And when we get together in December, prior to our meeting, I will put out an email to you all learning what I learned and what we can do, because it's not quite as simple as it looks. For instance, saying, are we in the path of growth? That's not something that the Board of Supervisors can just say, oh no, we're not in the path of growth. We can't do that. So we talked about population. I've been working on the population figures using building permits and all that kind of stuff and gotten it way down. But the question is okay, so you've done all this, but we don't care because we have to use these particular figures, or, what can we do? Unfortunately, when landscapes was done, which is the Chester County comprehensive plan, so to speak, we meaning Franklin Township did not solicit, so to speak, to have us be a rural center. London Britain did. They worked really hard. Their supervisors kept going.
Rural landscape in London.
A landscape. I'm sorry. What did I call it?
Rural center. You're not a rural center. Rural landscape.
Rural landscape. Sorry. So they worked really hard to get that designation. We did not, and so we are considered suburban.
Well, you have some rural.
I know we do, but that's our category, so to speak. Even though we have more than some rural, we actually have preserved more open space than London Britain.
Just interrupt 1 second, Nan. So everybody knows, London Britain was updating their comprehensive plan at the same time Landscapes 3 was being developed. And Landscapes 3, the initial pass at the landscapes map, showed London Britain as having definitely some suburban area, particularly in the northern area, and then sort of in the central area. And London Britain was in the process of doing their comprehensive plan, and their task force and their supervisors fought back on that. And then they got the redesignation as a rural landscape. So that's what Nan's talking about. They had probably as much suburban shown as you all have now in Franklin in the initial pass, on the first landscapes.
but they got the designation and we did not. And
But
that's a big thing.
when is the next landscapes going to happen? Like when's the next iteration?
2028.
Okay. It's fine.
So-
That's good.
so
We're gonna get
anyway,
ready
so-
for it.
So anyways, we can discuss it. I'll have all the information that I need. There's no reason to discuss it now because it'd just be, fueling other questions. I think with Janine that we've got everything in a good spot to go to the solicitor and figure out what we need to do. Okay, Janine, it's your game.
Okay, so I am going to share the agenda. And so I just want to quickly go over next steps so that everybody knows where we are in the process. It was on the agenda. We are going to be hopefully this meeting and next meeting really wrapping up at least the task force ideas for priority subjects, goals, and recommendations. And then we will be sending out before the next meeting the summary of the interviews so that you all can see what took place in the interviews. They've gone well so far. I'll give you a brief summary in a minute. We're going to have our next community meeting in January, and I believe we decided it was going to be during our regular meeting, which would be on January 26th. So in December, we'll have to talk about the format of that, and Nan and I will talk about that beforehand, before the December meeting, to get some ideas on what we should do for it. And then in February, we're going to really be starting to look at actual draft materials, and in March and April start to review the plan itself. So just to let you know, we're in, I just lost my remote desktop connection. Anyway, I try to reconnect. Hopefully it didn't end up going all together. Anyway, while I try to reconnect, I will quickly go over what's happened in the interviews so far. So we have interviewed so far the realtor, Janine Lamb, and the businesses, and then the non-agricultural industry interview, and then also did the Kimblesville and the historic resource interview. And basically the bottom line of all those interviews, I mean, they all said it a little bit differently, but the bottom line of the interviews, even the business owners, even, in real estate, the bottom line is that open space preservation is extremely important, and that they would like to figure out a way how to preserve the rural character. And if development has to happen, then development would happen in such a way that it would preserve the rural character. And also, one of the conversations that came up a lot is how to address the road system, and particularly 896, given the fact that roads are an integral part of anything that happens in the township, since at this point it is, a vehicular oriented township. And there were a lot of points made about if we come back into a situation where development starts booming in southern Chester County, let's say, and there isn't very much, developable land left in Franklin, obviously, but there are some parcels that could still be developed. If that does happen, then how can that happen? Because the road structure really is okay with what you all have now, but it really can't handle, additional development. So I think those were some of the main focuses. Everybody seemed to generally like the idea of Kimblesville being a destination with a little d for agriculture, and also for, recreation destination. And there were different ideas on how that would look and, what that would mean. But everybody seemed to like that idea in general terms. And then also, there was definitely a sense throughout all of the interviews that preserving the historic resources and also the natural environment were just as important as preserving open space and agricultural resources and, agriculture as a business. So there were some ideas.
should we ask, are you giving a summary now? Should we ask questions if we have a question about your interviews, or is this just?
Yeah, I'm just giving you a quick overview while I try to reconnect back to my remote desktop that I just got booted off of. So
Janine, you had sent me an email way back and I didn't respond just because I was overwhelmed. But you talked about traffic and an official map. How does that work? Do you want to go over that at all, or this is not the time?
I think that might be too much for right now.
Okay.
But you bring up, I'm glad you brought up traffic and transportation, because I shared with Nan and also Paul knows, also I reached out to, we have a section in the Planning Commission of transportation planners, and they also do trail planning. And so I reached out to them to ask if they could kind of brainstorm some conceptual ideas for the interconnected trail system that we all had talked about. And I want to say in all the interviews, without even being provoked, people mentioned, wouldn't it be really nice if Franklin Township had some greater walkability, particularly, you know, with climate change and particularly with the pressure on our road system. And one of the interviews actually said, well, we could actually maybe relieve some of the local pressure on the road system, particularly if more people continue to work at home, you know, post-COVID, if people could walk or bike places within the township and not always have to get in their car to, you know, just go a half mile in the township. So with that idea, our transportation planners would be looking at your current trail system, you know, within the preserves and in the park, and then looking at possibilities for, and again, this is from a 30,000 foot view. This isn't engineered. This isn't a feasibility study. This is where might there be possibilities where trail connections could happen to connect key destinations. And then within Kimblesville, where are the possibilities where a pedestrian network could be located? Somebody had suggested maybe the pedestrian network would be behind the buildings. So our transportation planners are willing to do that. And along with that, I asked them to also look at traffic calming, particularly through the village and maybe other key areas of the township. So they're going to start doing that, which I thought was great, you know, to have that expertise. And they're going to be reaching out to Paul after they familiarize themselves with the township, you know, a little bit more as sort of a boots on the ground approach, since he does a lot of volunteer work and, you know, is very familiar with the existing trail system and also maybe what's feasible and what's not feasible. So we're taking that approach. And then I also reached out to, we have a environmental planner in our office who addresses primarily sewer, but also gets a little bit into water and some other issues. And we're also doing a renewable energy plan for the county. So I reached out to that person as well to talk to them about, you know, can maybe they brainstorm some ideas as well that we all started talking about last month about renewables and green infrastructure, et cetera. So I just wanted to let you know that is happening in the background, and where you'll probably see that is when you actually review draft written materials for the various chapters. Did you want to ask questions about the interviews to date quickly? And then we'll get on with.
Could I make this, Paul? Could I make a comment about the
Sure.
The 896 traffic calming? You know, that's been studied for a decade or so, and the county and PennDOT had public input, and there's just so much been done about that. I just don't want them to reinvent the wheel. So I just want to make sure they're aware that there's a PennDOT 896 traffic calming, or whatever it's called, for, I don't know, like 10 miles of 896. So I want to make sure they are aware of it and read it before they start from scratch on how to address it.
Yes, our office, the only reason the 896 project was even initiated is because Franklin Township years ago had basically come to our office and said, can you put it on your regional transportation improvement inventory? And
Yeah.
then what happens is that regional inventory gets sent to the regional planning agency, which is called DVRPC in Philadelphia, for the entire Philadelphia region and also some areas in New Jersey. And then projects that are key get elevated to something called the Transportation Improvement Program. And it's those projects that are lined up for funding. So the only reason 896 has been funded is because it ended up on that, what we call the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program. And why I'm telling you that is because our transportation planners need to be thoroughly involved in all of those projects that are funded. And even before they get on that program, they have to be thoroughly involved, because that program relies heavily on Chester County Planning and the other county planning departments to move projects forward.
Good.
So to answer your question in a long way, yes, they are familiar with it. And yes, they know about it and have
Yeah,
been
that's
involved in
all
it.
you had to say is yes, they're familiar with it.
So just to explain, how that works so everybody understands it. So
Good.
anyway, does anybody else have any questions about the interviews to date? I don't want to spend too much time because we've only done half. And also we're going to put this in an email in a summary. But if there's any other
I have a
pertinent
quick
questions.
comment, kind of to follow up on Paul's, but in a different light. So Exelon owns Pico. And so when they're doing that green energy, Janine, I know you're really good at capturing comments. If you could direct them to say, I wonder if it is possible on that 66-acre parcel owned as a substation by Pico, if Exelon would put, the green energy on that. So that's a very targeted area, but it's something to look at that we're unique with Franklin.
Yeah, I mean, they could certainly, look at that as one of the questions they would look at in the whole green infrastructure.
Do you want me to send the parcel number to you? That's easy for me to do. I mean, I'll do that.
You can email it to me.
Yeah, I'll do that. Okay, good.
Yeah, that could be one of, series of items we talk about.
And
So
hang on. So along those lines, I just want to make sure I understand the process. It might make more sense, Barry, when you send it to Janine, that you also send it to Dave, because I think the task force could take much longer than getting a topic like this in front of the supervisors and putting more weight behind it than the comprehensive plan. It sounds to me like this should be put on a faster track than what we're doing.
I'll email it to everybody.
that sounds perfect. Everybody will be on the same page. So last time around, if you remember, we reviewed this document that I'm showing you right now, which was the priority subject areas and goals. And there were a number of recommendations on how to change things around. And that's what Nan was referring to. At the end of that meeting, we ended up, I believe, with 8 priority subject areas, which number one starts to lead to not really having any priority subject areas because there's so many, everything becomes a priority. And number two, it just simply, for practicality purposes, it's simply outside of our contract for priority subject areas. And so then the second document is, of course, what you were all sent before this meeting. And that shows the 6 priority subject areas that Nan referenced earlier in this meeting. And you had a chance to review that, hopefully before the meeting. And we can start to talk about it. We talked about many of these last time around, not all of them, but we talked about many of these last time around. And for example, this was a recommendation from last time around that I am now going to cross out. We didn't talk about the land use last time around, if you remember, because we were going to wait for Nan, as she referenced, to bring up more information that she's learning. So would you all feel comfortable if we picked up where we left off, or do you, now that you've had the document to see and read, do you want to just start over from the beginning, now that you've familiarized yourself with it? What would you all feel more comfortable doing?
I don't want to do everything, for sure, personally, but it seems like as I read through here, the common thread for a lot of this stuff, for example, with industrial zoning or HDR or growth, the septic and sewer keeps coming up. So I'm just going to make that comment because those types of developments require an intensive sort of treatment. It requires some effort, usually a low-lying area. So that's my only comment.
Barry,
I think,
go
I
We're
ahead.
not
think you
going to
have,
talk about land use tonight at all. Remember, we weren't going to talk about it until Nan straightens out more information about land use. So is that what you were going to say, Nan?
Well, no, what I was going to say too about septic and sewer and all that, you all got copies of Act 537, which is kind of what is the Bible, so to speak, of sewer and that sort of thing. And I think that we have a recommendation back further in the document where it says it should be updated. So Barry, would you be satisfied if we maybe put together a task force to look at the Act 537 and the ordinances that are currently in the township to handle those types of issues that you have referenced?
I'm just thinking that, yeah, it's a major thread. And to do this development correctly, we need to protect the groundwater and protect our resources and sort of step into the 21st century with respect to the septic. So if you want to do it with a task force, I'm great with that. The thing that I'm concerned about is there's a geography aspect, because usually if you're going, you want a gravity fed system, and that limits your options in the township geographically. And so a lot of the stuff is, oh, I'd love to put it in Kemblesville, but maybe there's a better location based upon the fact that the lowest points in the township are somewhere else. So I don't know how you want to handle it, but I just see it as a horse and cart thing, where maybe the sewer and the ability to handle these demands has to be considered first.
But Janine, do you think that updating Act 537 and the ordinances would be a number one step in going in that general direction? And two, don't forget that when a development comes in and they are recommending what their septic or sewer systems are going to be, it's studied quite thoroughly by our sewer expert, Sandy, and others. It's not something that's taken very lightly in the township. It's always been a very serious and important thing that we've looked at.
I mean,
Janine,
the 537 plan is going to be your guiding document, period. That's it. The 537 plan, even though it's called a plan, it's quasi-regulatory in how it functions, in that, for example, if you have a master plan for a trail, let's say on the books, and you decide that there's a recommendation in there and it's a lousy place for a trail, if you deviate from that, you deviate from that. If you have a recommendation in the 537 plan for sewage facilities about how you're going to do sewer, then you can't deviate from that without actually amending the entire plan through something called a sewage module. And that sewage module has to be reviewed through the township, through Chester County Planning Commission, and actually through the state, through DEP. So it's not just a whatever situation. So I think what has to happen is, I think during this process, it would be helpful if somebody, and maybe Barry can lead this, maybe there's a subgroup of folks on the task force who really take a deeper dive into your Act 537 plan. And did you say Sandy is your sewage facility consultant or your engineer? Is that her name? And maybe if you get permission, maybe to have a short amount of her time for any questions you have. And then based on that, the land use plan should be developed, in coordination with what's already on the books. And a recommendation of this plan should be any changes that are going to be needed to the 537 plan. And then after this plan is adopted, because this plan would be your master land use plan, then you would update your 537 plan to match the recommendations on this plan. But they do go hand in glove. It's important to know.
I like that idea. Yeah, I like that idea of coordinating, because, we can make all the plans in the world and then tie Sandy's hands where she says, this would have been a much better option. And so the idea of coordinating up front is a great idea.
Yeah, I think having that as a dual process, but is just a subgroup who can really get into the weeds on it, I think that would be a good approach. So, because you're right, and I will say that at least one interviewee that I spoke with, I believe it was on Monday, did speak about the fact that not only roads, but sewer and water obviously drive what uses can occur on land. It's not a free-for-all. It does depend on what access to sewer and water you have, because they are necessary. So what I would like to do then is
I was going to say that I think you should continue where you were. Otherwise, we're going to just keep beating to death the same 3 subjects at the top.
okay. I was going to also suggest that I wanted to make sure that the priority areas and these 6 priority areas everybody is comfortable with, as opposed to the 8 priority subject areas that we had started talking about last time, which are outlined in the document I'm bringing up right now. So really quickly, just to run through them, the priority subject areas, and these are based on all the public feedback that we've gotten as well, would be Kimblesville Village enhancements and how to enhance the village, historic resources and walkability, and land use. Then ag retention, and that is both agriculture as a business and an industry, and also how to preserve ag land and getting in development patterns, and also how to talk about how to address soil protection in terms of agriculture. The third then would be trails and other pedestrian circulation connections, and this gets into your pedestrian connections, whether it's the multi-use trail system or the pedestrian walkway system. Road cycling, I know, was one that we had talked about, maybe moving to roads, but we're going to leave it here right now for just a moment. And the regional coordination would be more how to have regional pedestrian bicycle planning with your neighbors, like New Garden and what's going on in Landenberg, and then maybe, Elk and some of your other neighbors. And then resource protection, and specifically as green infrastructure, how do you use your current resources as really your existing infrastructure? Water resources is a big one, as we just talked about, because everybody relies on wells. Then other natural resource protection as being green infrastructure, and also nice to look at. Open space preservation as being green infrastructure, and also aesthetic and maintaining the rural environment. And then also historic and scenic resources is also being part of your existing community character infrastructure, and also, energy conservation infrastructure, because you already have those buildings built. And then the last category would be roads and other community infrastructure. And there was talk about maybe moving on-road bicycling here, which we could certainly, add into this section as one of the draft goals. But this would be looking at community facilities and the rural infrastructure. And this is where we're starting to get into, the sewer situation and the water situation. This is the recommendation Nan was just speaking about the 537 plan. And then we talked about a little bit about this also, about water service areas and how they directly relate to sewer areas. And then talking about vehicular circulation, and now we're talking about roadways and all the various aspects of roadways. And then getting into parks and preserves. And I know last time around there was talk about whether this should be combined back into resource protection or if this should stay as a community facility. It really crosses the line of both. It is a community facility in terms of maintenance and, any kind of structures that are particularly part of the park. It's a community facility in that regard. But it could also fall into, obviously, resource protection. And in terms of the trails in the preserves and in the park, it could also fall into the whole pedestrian network. So I think it could go in any of those categories. The reason we had put it into community facilities is mainly because the township has to maintain the lands. And so that gets into a maintenance community facility administrative situation. And then last but not least, community facility is really this whole green energy concept and how to make the township go more towards green-based energy. And we had talked a lot about solar last time and how to work with PICO on that. And then last but not least, which we're not going to bring up until Nan gives us more information, is just the whole idea of future land use in the township. And that's where we'll talk about zoning recommendations and housing recommendations. So short of the couple, ideas that we talked about last time, which is how to deal with parks and preserves, and then how to deal with on-road cycling. Does everybody feel comfortable as these as the core 6 priority subject areas? I'm seeing a nod from Barry. Excellent. How about everybody else?
Yep.
Sure.
Hey, Mary, welcome. Okay, so we will run with that then. And how does everybody feel about moving the on-road cycling then to the roadway section? Is that good? Instead of having it with the pedestrian stuff.
Yeah.
So I am just going to cut it and paste it right now. Right after vehicular circulation. Okay, and then what do you all want to do with parks and preserves? It really depends on how you feel they're best addressed in the township as a community facility, or as I said, really under this resource protection goal, or under this even pedestrian, oriented connectivity goal. The only reason I was throwing that out there is because as you all, first of all, it's short on subcategories. So the chapter, would still have some room for more information. That's one practical approach. But then the second major approach is on all the community outreach that we've done so far, every time you talk about pedestrian circulation or multi-use trails, some of the major destinations that always come up is the park and then the preserves, as well as Kimblesville. Those seem to be the major destinations, and then also residential developments. So it seems like it could naturally fall into the circulation, pedestrian circulation category as being one of the major destinations, and if not the major destination for walkability.
I'm unclear what are you suggesting, just real quick?
I am suggesting that the entire preserve park category potentially move into this priority subject area based on public feedback.
Which is pedestrian circulation in general in the village, right?
Pedestrian circulation in general throughout the township.
Throughout the township. I like linking them all together. I like linking all walking together, even if it has multiple purposes.
I agree.
Yeah, just like the bicycling, I like putting that with the automotive because I think from a safety and from a safety standpoint, it's the same.
Right, and when you improve, if there's any road improvements, then road cycling should be taken into consideration, for the road improvements.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just gonna paste this into here, just so we can all see.
So this is going into this priority subject trail and other pedestrian circulation connections, correct?
Yeah, I have no idea what just happened there.
Okay, so this is going into the trail and other pedestrian circulation connections? That's the priority subject you're moving it to, is it?
Yeah.
That's what I understand, Barry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hold on
Okay.
a second. I just had. Did you all see how weird that was?
I saw it. Yeah, you're having some kind of issue.
Yeah,
I would cut it again. I would, just cut it again.
that's what I'm going to do. That was very strange.
Yeah, I think you're going to find it might be coded as a bitmap, or that's what I saw pop up. Let's see what happens now. Oh, technology. There
Oof,
you go.
I'm going to save it quickly. Have to do a quick save. Okay, so then we will have that in this bigger category, and the bigger category is trail and other pedestrian circulation connections.
So just to clean up there for you, Janine, the road cycling is still in the.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah, just clean as we go.
So we will add preserves and parks. And really it's as destinations. I'm going to say local destinations because you're not opening it up to the whole world.
I'm sorry, Janine, where did road cycling go? Which subject did it go to?
hold on, I'm going to scroll down here. It went into the category called roads on page 1 million, roads and other community infrastructure. And so I'm going to add road cycling into here. I try to put everything in yellow highlight. I'm sure you guys have noticed that's new from the meeting, so we can identify it quickly as new information. Okay, I think those are really good categories.
Was equestrian included up above with the walking?
It's included under the multi-use trails.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
multi-use.
Okay. Oh, we
Yeah.
specifically stated equestrian.
We didn't state any specific uses yet. We can certainly add equestrian. I don't believe we put a specific use.
I
Like
thought
we didn't say mountain biking, you know, we didn't say mountain biking, that sort of thing, but we can certainly
We generally just say non-motorized because we don't want to be specific, exclude anything.
so I'm just going to add here multi-use in parentheses. We'll say non-motorized.
Yeah.
In the last comprehensive plan, we talked a lot about equestrian use. And one of the reasons is that equestrian use sometimes is considered a commercial use. And we wanted to make sure that as a use, it's considered agriculture. So when we get to that whole part of the plan, that definition will be made.
Okay, so we have hiking, walking, equestrian use that I'm adding here. Is off-road cycling a use?
Yeah, biking for sure.
Okay. I'm going to say cycling so nobody thinks you mean dirt bikes.
When does an e-bike? When does an e-bike qualify as a dirt bike?
Oh,
You know, that's actually a really good question that I've heard a lot of people starting to struggle with, because there's scooters.
Oh, there's-
non-motorized.
There's all kinds of hybrid vehicles now that are used on trails.
There's e-bikes can easily go 25, 30 miles an hour.
We'll let our kids worry about it.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to do something. I'm going to start from the bottom to make sure we get through everything we need to, rather than starting at the top. So this last subject area is rather big before the land use area. And we started to talk about this last time, but we didn't make it through all of it. So the roads and other community infrastructure topic. So we have the community facilities in a rural landscape, and we did get to talk about the 537 plan, the water, et cetera, for the draft recommendations. And then we started to talk about vehicular circulation, but we didn't make it very far before the meeting ended. So the draft goal would be vehicular circulation, as you're reading on the screen. Obviously, a safe and efficient transportation network, which is what everybody wants. And then also regional transportation planning and projects that relate to the network in the township. So the first recommendation to consider would be working with Newark, Delaware, to determine ways to make P896 less desirable as a truck route. Interestingly, in one of the interviews, and Paul, was this the interview with Kimblesville? It may have been. One of the things that was stated is that at least residents of Kimblesville have noticed that as of recent, there seems to be less truck traffic coming through 896 and more just regular vehicular traffic, which I thought was an interesting observation. And this was pre-COVID. This isn't a long time pre-COVID, but this was pre-COVID. So I don't know if that's because 896 is relatively, windy and narrow, or if there's some other reason. But
Ask Google. Google directs all of these traffic patterns. So
No,
Well,
an algorithm change they have.
I think generally GPS does not send, or what, I shouldn't say I think, this is what people were telling me in the interviews. GPS generally does not send trucks up 896 if it can be avoided unless there's a
No,
specific business.
That's not true.
That's
There's-
new too. That's a change over the last few years. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're in Newark, there's no way for a truck to get to Lancaster other than 896. That's it.
Right, that's what I meant, if there's no
Yeah.
other way, but if
Yeah.
there's other
No.
ways.
I think,
Try it, Paul. Try it. Put it into Google now. Newark to Lancaster. You'll see.
yeah, what do you see?
I'm
So-
doing Waze. It's right up 896.
Right up 896. So what my point is though, is I think it's because the Chrysler plant shut down.
I agree.
That's why there's
Okay.
fewer trucks.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And the increase
That's a
in
big problem.
regular cars is due to development north and south of us. Not
Yeah.
us, but north and south of us.
So is this recommendation a good one? Work with Newark?
I still think it's good because, and I'm going to remember what Barry said months ago. You know, they want to, the main street of Newark is struggling with truck traffic. And are they inadvertently pushing us up, pushing the trucks up our way? Right?
Yeah, I think there's several ways to go about it. Kathy, they would never push it up 896 since that's the feeder, goes right through Newark, and they hate that. They've worked very hard to diminish that amount of traffic. But there's several ways to attack this traffic control issue, and working with Newark, or at least being aware of what they're doing, is one of them. So it's on that radar.
I
Well,
will.
I think too, the calming of the traffic is a big issue. And Newark's has some really good success on 896, particularly if you go down to the shopping center, that's a Lion food store now. Nobody does over 25 miles an hour going through there because you never know when the police are going to be out and you will get a speeding ticket. So they've been very successful in calming the traffic down as it comes into a shopping center and more homes. Maybe we could learn something from Newark on that, because we need to calm our traffic on 896. It's too darn fast. I don't know.
Well, we're going to take care of that, Mary. We're going to buy a dummy cop car and park it at 1694 New London Road, and we're going to move it up and down the village here.
I thought I'd get my blow hair dryer and going out there and aiming it at the cars. They
Well,
won't know.
I mean, you jest, but this started as a discussion amongst friends in the village, and we went out and looked it up. Those things are being used in other communities for calming purposes.
How about that?
So, also on Waze, we will, and the reason I'm on Waze, I will from time to time report that there's police activity in the village on Waze, as a way to slow it down. I know other people in the village that do that too,
Okay.
even though it's a lie.
Okay.
There's also truck traffic that comes down Appleton Road. It's not as much as 896, but Appleton Road's a small road, and for a small road, there's a fair amount of truck traffic. We want to include that as something.
And there's a bunch of them. There's a line of them that go every night at 9 o'clock. So they probably hit you about 9:02 because I can see them out my back window on Appleton Road.
Yeah.
There's 4 of them every night.
There's one particular truck called Fast Track, which I think is an ag truck. They go like crazy. They're up and down all the time, and they go like very, very fast. I
they
think
do
we
go
should at least address that. Fast Track, they go fast. But I think we should address that Appleton Road it's state road, but it's very narrow and not really equipped to handle truck traffic.
So what we're not saying here, and I started out as a joke and I'm going to now make it serious, is that I do think, and Barry was the first one to really cue me into this, it's the understanding of technologies and their influence on traffic patterns that needs to be reflected in this comp plan to show that we're thinking like 21st century residents of the township. So as GPS goes, that's how traffic's going to go in our area. So understanding those algorithms, that's not for me. It's not my job. I'm hoping I'm going to be an ageist here. Who's the guy here? Mason, right? It's for that generation to really start to understand how to wield the power of these algorithms, to create, to use that as a traffic calming mechanism, in addition to some of these old fashioned, techniques of police activity and things like that.
Oh gosh.
I don't know. I know Liz Ramby in the village had the slow down sign there. I don't know if we've gotten any feedback from her about it. We own the property right next to her, and I have been paying attention. It does seem like some people tune into it. So I don't know if moving that thing around is something to consider.
Joan, have you had any feedback since we put up that flashing sign to try and slow them down on Appleton Road? Is it working?
Mary, I have it. I mean, in the beginning, we did have some calls. I believe it does make a difference because I know when I turn off of 896 and I'm, waiting at the little yield there before I pull out there and cars are coming straight down from 896 South to go on the Appleton Road. I see them, they see that sign and they hit their brakes.
Okay.
Everybody doesn't pay attention to it, obviously, but I do think it makes a difference. We can go out. I believe we can get a reading from that. I'll talk to Jeff about that tomorrow to see what the average speed is through there, but it does make a difference. And the reason we bought that on the trailer was so that we can move it around to different sites. I was just talking to Jeff about that last week, that I think it's time to pick another spot and see what we can, if we can make a difference somewhere. So it's something we can always do. And to put it on 896 or on a state road, we just have to ask for permission from PennDOT and they let us do it.
Joan, on that similar topic, are you allowed to do camera-based speed ticketing since we don't have a police force?
Not that I'm aware of, Barry. I mean, we have put cameras out just for our own use to count traffic for road grants and things of that nature, but we can't do it to ticket anyone.
We don't know though. Because if we did have that, that's a technology that will definitely affect traffic flow, which will go back into the algorithms.
But see, we can't even ticket anybody when they go down Appleton Road too fast because you have to have enough notice ahead of time of the change in speed and enough space for them to slow down before the police are able to give them a ticket. So they could not ticket somebody on Appleton Road until you're past the stop sign and speeding.
I don't think
It's a camera system, but okay, all right.
I don't think Pennsylvania allows for those camera systems. Have you seen one in Pennsylvania? I know they have them in Delaware.
I've been ticketed other places, but I believe you're correct. I have not got one from Pennsylvania.
Camera speeding or camera running lights?
No, camera speeding. I don't think they're allowed in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I got 3 in England, like in rapid succession. So.
Yeah, there was a court case some years ago that threw that out.
Yeah.
They definitely have cameras on red lights though.
Yeah, but not for speeding.
But not for speeding.
I thought I saw something about work zones, though. Weren't they passing something for work zones?
Oh, maybe.
That would make
Maryland has that.
One thing to keep in mind is that the realignment of 896 is going to put an all-way stop in the center of the village. And so it is going to change the ability to move down Appleton Road with acquired, existing speed. You will have to actually accelerate down Appleton Road to speed as fast as they're doing now.
The thing we do need to look at is whether or not that stop sign is going to put pressure on smaller roads. People, as traffic slows down and backs up, people find other ways.
And they go fast, to your point, Chuck, and they'll go fast on the smaller roads.
Yeah, they're gonna go, if not fast, they're gonna go the same speed that they were trying to go down the main road on a much, much smaller road.
But where do you think they're going to go, Chuck? I mean, I think 841 is the easiest cutoff, which is already an issue. Just thinking about this practically, you can't really turn down Peacedale. So it's going to happen above that. It'll be at 841, probably.
I think you can, but you can go down Peacedale to Franklin and then back into that pretty community back there and then out on the water.
But
yeah, you can't.
If you're trying to get somewhere fast, that's not the way to do it.
Well, but it's yeah. I mean, I've commuted for a long time. It's the illusion of moving. So people, I think, will take that route so that they're not sitting in place on 896 and instead cruising through those neighborhoods to get to work, just to have the illusion of moving.
Okay, so that could be, Kathy, but if you're going to, shall I say, do the GPS argument, I remember sitting on the New York State Thruway in a not moving and having the GPS tell me I am on the fastest route. So if someone's relying on GPS, they might not actually be sent that way.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. We're not going to be able to, there's no, I don't know what the answer is here. That's the flashing light. If we could move that around, that sounds like an interesting thing. Let's see what happens when the stop sign gets in. What is the timing for that?
That is the $24,000 question.
Yeah.
They're thinking around 2022,
Oh, wow.
doing that work.
And Joan, what was the original time frame?
Oh, we're well past it.
So if it's led another 4 years, would anybody be surprised?
No.
They're already purchasing right of ways though, so they are moving on this.
Okay.
That takes a long time. All the negotiation on that.
Here's one possible shortcut, but people may already take it. If you're going to go into West Grove, people may be pushed onto Flint Hill Road.
Mm-hmm.
With this
So-
GPS discussion, I mean, it sounds like local people, and particularly Franklin Township residents, may really go to the whole idea of keep moving because they know exactly where they're going and all the back roads. And then GPS people might be, more for people, trucks and people who aren't from Franklin Township and are just trying to get through the township. So you might have a mixed bag of residents cutting through other roads to avoid the stop sign, but then GPS people from outside the township just following you are on the fastest route.
Well, it's not just people within the township. It's commuters that are going to and fro because they will become familiar with the
Right. Anybody
bypasses.
that comes familiar. That's correct. Anybody that comes familiar with it. Yeah. Okay, moving on to the next recommendation then, coordinate roadway improvements with integrated strategies that enable farm equipment to travel within the township, especially along main corridors. For example, shoulders that could be simultaneously used by buggies and on-road cyclists. Lopping roadside foliage. We heard about this in the community workshop, and also in the interviews, I heard a lot about foliage on roadsides, and then moving signage so it's not obstructing views. How does everybody feel about this recommendation?
I think that would only apply to the major roads because I don't think there's, without a lot of expense, we'll be able to do that on the minor roads through the township.
Is it okay how it's worded then, where it says especially along major roads, or should we just have it along major roads?
Well, I think that's okay.
Does anybody else have any other comments, or can I move on to the next one?
Well, I have a
No,
question about.
I think that's fine the way it is, because if we have the opportunity on a non-major road, maybe we're paving it that year, we'll take care of it, but I would like to leave it the way it is.
I think this was from Dave Hawking's comment that when West Grove did their calming improvements and narrowed the road, putting curbs and sidewalks, he can no longer bring his farm equipment through there. And he's concerned that when we do the same in Kimballsville, he'll no longer be able to go through Kimballsville. So when it says coordinate roadway improvements, that's what he's talking about.
I did reach out to the representative from PennDOT about that situation because they were talking about possibly putting some islands that would help tame the traffic. And Dave did have a real concern about that, about being able to get his equipment down Appleton Road and move it around on 896. So I did make them aware of that.
We just need to know what his minimum width is and make sure any traffic calming can accommodate that. That's what it comes down to.
Something to remember with respect to that is that when they did what they did in West Grove, they put in hard curbs on the outside of the road, and we will not have that here. And so that's a very big difference in terms of where your wheels can go, even if you're trying to dodge, say, a calming island.
Well, I'm impressed you're so confident we won't have hard curves, but hopefully that's true. But you know,
Deneen, I've tried twice to get this DOT contact to give us the plans, the current plans for that intersection, and he won't even respond to me.
Barry, I have those.
Okay, you have the most recent ones?
The most recent ones that they gave me, yes.
Okay, then if we could see those, that would be terrific.
Okay.
That would be great. Okay. Thank you, John.
it's basically
Paul,
it's put an
there are no hard curves in the current plan. Now, what happens 10 years from now, I can't guarantee, but there are no hard curves.
Good.
Right.
It's
Where's
basically to put in some islands and some signage, some big flower pots in the middle, and a T at 896 Appleton Road.
where do all the signs pop up for approaching intersections and stuff like that come from on, say, Chesterville Road, Joan?
Well, that's a state road, and the PennDOT puts that up, and there are requirements as to how far they have to be from an intersection.
Okay, because
Does that
they've, well,
answer?
yeah, I mean, so we've increased the number of signs on Chesterville Road by threefold in the last 5 years. I don't know what
The only signs we're allowed to put up on a state road are speed limits. If they're under 45 miles an hour, we're responsible for that, and we're responsible for bus signs. Or in the case of the Amish farm down here, we had to put up the buggy signs. But all other signs are PennDOT's responsibilities.
and we
You say
don't
bus, you
really,
mean school bus?
Pardon me? Yes, school bus stop ahead, that type of sign. We're responsible for that. And as I said, we had to put up buggy signs for the Amish families down on Appleton Road. And we put some up on 896 towards the border up there with New London.
Oh, so you could put up a sign that says 15 miles an hour around that school zone during certain hours.
What school zone?
Well, like the Avon Grove, like charter school.
It does have that.
Yeah,
It's
it
got a
is.
flashing light there.
Yeah.
how
And
fast?
would
I'd
you
probably
put
go
up the
too fast.
on-road cycling signs too? If there was on-road cycling, would you put up?
We
like-
don't have any room for on-road.
No, I mean, would that be your responsibility also though, or is that a? PennDOT?
I'd have to check. I would imagine it would be. I don't think PennDOT would do that.
Okay.
I would
I was-
imagine.
I was looking for less signs, not more. Less signs, because then they just become obstacles. Talk about cyclists, things that are not safe for cyclists, signs all up and down.
That's true. They
And,
can smack your head on them.
yeah, and pedestrians. I mean, you can't walk on the side if every 3 feet you got to step around a sign.
It's true.
But Chuck, like you can fight a sign or you can fight a tractor trailer. And I'll tell you, on a bike, I'll take a sign any day. And that's what we're really up against. One sign can drop you many tractor trailers if we lower those speed limits. So I
Yeah,
cover them on the major highway, major throughputs for sure.
I'm not talking about the speed limit signs. I'm talking about just start looking at all the signs we have. We have signs, so many signs. You're approaching an intersection that may be times 3. A lot of signs.
I'm willing to deal. I get what you're saying, like historic district and the flashing lights and anticipate this turn. But again, the advantage is look, if we can drop the tractor trailer traffic and allow more safe conduits for bicyclists, I'm all for it, because I've been in a head-on accident with a vehicle. You guys can tell that the way I act. And it's not pleasant. So any sign we can put up to prevent that, I'm all for.
So moving on to the next recommendation, are we okay with what we have written here then to move on to the next one? You've already provided information, as I was mentioning, to the transportation improvement inventory. So it's basically just saying continue to provide transportation projects to put on that regional transportation or the county transportation improvement inventory, which then goes to the regional inventory. Coordinate with PennDOT and Chester County regarding the maintenance of state-owned roadways and bridges to ensure that they're repaired and addressed in a manner consistent with Franklin Township's rural character. And this sounds like a throwaway recommendation, but this is actually really important because how roads and bridges are maintained will generally follow a use statement. And so the township has to make sure that they get ahead of the game or in the early stages of the game to make sure the use statement involves Franklin's rural character and doesn't, involve maybe the use statement that you would have in, Westchester or West Goshen, which would be an entirely different use statement. And once that use statement is developed, then a lot or everything goes into that use statement, including sometimes how the improvements are funded and what state requirements are needed for that particular set of improvements. So it's very important that the township get ahead of that and keep in communication with Chester County and PennDOT to know when things are even starting to be proposed, not after they've been proposed, but when, they're an inkling of proposal. That's why that's in here. Continue to discourage speeding and neighborhood cut through traffic. We talked about that. Work with state police. You can have speed limit signs, your flashing signs, your flashing light and stop signs.
Should we include bans on brake arresters generally in the township? Can we do that?
I think we should.
We do. We have those through the village already.
You don't have them near my house.
Well, we did have them up by the intersection up there at 841. So I don't
They
know.
are on the village. I can back Joan up on that. I did see that one sign.
Yeah, I've seen them. That's why I suggest that maybe it should be township wide if we could.
Again, that's a state road. We have to ask for that.
I would ask.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, if it affects the Kathy's like cows and bull, like, yeah. 100%.
They hate it. They move right back at it.
There you go. Lower meat quality. Get that
Right.
brake retarder in.
Right.
No, there's
So-
already one in the village, right?
Yes.
Yes. On
So
all,
along the same lines, how about the bumps on the sides and sometimes in the middle to create noise?
Traffic humps?
Rumble strips or whatever.
Rumble strip kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
you want
Good or
those?
bad?
I think it's just noise pollution. It's
It
you're
is,
on-
Chuck, but it's proven to save many lives for sleepy drivers.
But
yeah,
it's also- it's
on
very-
our road on 896. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not
They're-
going to have reaction time.
They're very dangerous for the Amish with their buggies to try and get over to the edge of the road. They can't get
Yeah.
over to the side when you have those rumble, whatever you
Yeah.
want to call those
You can't
cutouts.
you can't
I
bike
think-
either.
Yeah, I think all the new cars have got warnings for that. At least mine does.
What about speed humps?
No.
No.
Don't talk about those.
But Paul, I understand that, on larger roads and such, but by the time if you fell asleep on 896, you're already in the ditch by the time you wake up. That rumble strip went and you hit the ditch.
So I agree they're noisy, but it is helpful, especially people crossing the center line and the head-on traffic. It alerts you to straighten up before you. And it's not just sleeping, but inattentive drivers, texting,
Yeah.
cell phone.
So, I'll just make a 21st century plea here again. I do think over the 10-year period, some of this stuff may take care of itself in other ways. I'm going to go back to Barry's camera comment. I think the insurance companies are making a pretty big plea, and it would be interesting if anybody knows more about this than I do. But my understanding is that with the data that's being collected in cars, You could potentially be fined for your behavior in a cooperative relationship between insurance on your car and the police, or whatever, maybe some administrative function. So I did read or watch something that in not too far into the future, there's some areas that you could get ticketed for speeding in a 35 in a school zone, for example. And it's because your car is telling a system that you're doing that versus others. So I guess my long-winded way of getting here is that I think there continue to be some technological changes. I'm deliberately not saying improvements, technological changes that may inadvertently take care of some of this stuff versus us putting in rumble strips and, which I'm actually not fundamentally opposed to, particularly in the center. I think on the side, they do create some problems on rural roads, but in the center I can get behind. I guess my pitch is for, let's make sure we have in 10 years from now that this thing was thinking about 2030 instead of 2020.
Those rumble strips are on the sides are also dangerous for bike riders because they can't get over to the side of the road.
That's true.
That's true. Very true.
I think that in balance on 896 where they are, it's more of a hazard than a help. That's my personal opinion. And currently the state is making these decisions. So if they put them in a year, they're in there for another 20.
Well, I did make them aware of that issue also when I spoke to the designers for the 896 improvements, that the Amish find those very difficult for their horses, especially if they try to stay on the edge of the road so someone can go around them.
So they're not putting them in?
I can't, I asked them not to.
Hopefully, yeah.
We'll see.
Okay.
I mean, you can imagine with the buggy when it gets over into those, and then the horse's hoofs, having to hit every one of those.
They can't do it. A horse can't do that.
No.
Horses actually trip and go down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not aware of it.
Actually, we have a newly elected state senator that I've already made an appointment that when she gets settled in her office in December, I want to go meet her and talk to her. And these are the issues. I want her to know who I am, who Franklin Township is. And these are the issues that, I think could have influence over. It's what we have to do, because the center, I agree with the bumps in the center lane, because you can get distracted and you instantly get put back where you should be. But the ones on the side of the road, they're a problem for a lot of people. So, but I don't know. I'm going to start trying to work through our new state senator. I mean, I'm sorry Plaguey resigned, but let's hope this new gal is even better. But she's going to know who Franklin Township is. Okay.
Should we categorize our roads? Should we go through and categorize our roads, maybe 3 different levels, one being a state numbered highway, one being a connector road between township roads, and the third being, development roads, and the third being development roads that are basically dead ends? Should we document that?
Well, what we generally do is at the Planning Commission, periodically, we update something we call the functional road classification system throughout the county. And so what we would do is we would create a map and present what our idea of the functional road classification is in the township. And we base it on generally on use of the roads in terms of vehicular traffic volumes and other measures. And then you can, give it a thumbs up or thumbs down if you want to keep that same functional classification that we're proposing, or if you want to go in a different direction. The reason it's also useful for you to consider, how the County Planning Commission has proposed it is because that plays back into this whole regional transportation improvement inventory. And what classification the road is, how many people travel on it. Obviously, just by a matter of, economy of scale, those types of projects generally are more likely to get funded than a project, that has 100 people traveling on the road daily. So yes, we will do that when we get to that, the planning element, the plan itself.
So we'll put it into our plan?
Yeah.
Okay, and I would volunteer to look at what the county has and see whether I agree or disagree and bring that before the,
You can look right on, it should be on chescoplanning.org under our map gallery. We
okay,
should have we call it a functional classification, a roadway functional classification map. So you can already get started on that.
okay.
Okay, so then moving down to road cycling, which is now added to the roadway priority. So consider how to improve bicycle connectivity infrastructure to foster Kimballsville as a recreation center. It should say and. Okay, identify road improvements that facilitate current on-road cycling, coupled with implementing other objectives, as you can read here, and coordinate cycling ag Amish communities for input and feasible improvement ideas. And then also seek the multimodal funding, which has, well, pre-COVID, that as a funding source has grown in recent years, particularly through PennDOT, et cetera, who are trying to really encourage municipalities and counties to develop other non-vehicular types of, forms of transportation, and not just recreation. So how do you feel about these recommendations? Should there be any other recommendations? In terms of on-road cycling?
I would say that on-road cycling to Campbellsville is difficult because 896 is a difficult road to travel on. So I personally avoid it, although I ride on almost every other road in the township. So something would have to really be done if we anticipate it being a destination for cyclists.
You'd have to make a shoulder. There's no other way. It's suicide otherwise. Right? And you guys notice if you come up through Delaware into Maryland for 500 feet, they have a nice wide shoulder. And as soon as it says Pennsylvania, the shoulder literally stops. There's a tree.
Chuck, would you favor, like, maybe we only get one of the two? Maybe we get Appleton Road instead of 896. Like, in your perspective, if we said Appleton Road is going to be our thrust and we're going to make that bikeable, is that like just as good of a goal as trying to get something out of 896?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay, so maybe that's the easier low-lying fruit for us to go after.
Especially since it goes right past Appleton Road, Fairhill.
Yeah, it goes right by Fairhill. You're right.
Yeah.
That's
I don't know. I don't see them as equal, Barry. I mean, maybe because you're in the south end of the township, but Appleton Road stops at Kimballsville. You're missing half the township.
But that's up there where you are. Okay, well, the first half we'll settle for Appleton. The second half is 896, and I agree that needs to be dealt with.
I mean, another thoroughfare is Flint Hill Road, which I know isn't all in our township, and then 841.
Maybe that's something for you guys on the northern part to think about, because I'm with Chuck that Appleton would be great. And then on the other side, if we could find an easier low-lying piece of fruit to pick from for the bike lane, then everybody wants the least trafficked road to go by.
You'd have to get Nan to give up like 5,000 feet of frontage to give you a shoulder.
She did it for the gas company. I don't know why she.
Yeah, not me. I've got a pipeline on my side. They're gonna have to take it from the other side.
Don't bring up the pipeline to Nan.
Don't bring me up to the pipeline. It's more like it.
The answer on our side is Chesterville Road after it leaves 841 is a heavily biked road. It's very popular
Yeah,
for
that's true.
people from Delaware and even from Westchester. And then they jump, depending on which way they're going. So if they're going south, they jump back on 841 south and probably go down. We just said it.
Flint Hill.
Flint Hill. If they're going north, they go north on 841 up through West Grove. So,
I get a lot on my street too.
yeah, anybody that knows that would definitely take it.
Anyway, the problem is in many areas, any of these widenings would require removing somebody's front lawn and in some cases their front porch. So it's a difficult topic.
Especially through the village.
Yeah, that's why I was being sarcastic, but it's that close.
Yeah.
Doesn't the right of way on some of these major roads actually go into their front yard anyway?
Yeah, no, into their
The right
front
of way?
porch. The 50-foot right of way can hit some of the front porches.
Okay.
Easily.
The 50-foot right of way would hit my front porch actually.
Yeah.
Okay, what about these two recommendations? Are they okay? Should we supplement that at all, or?
Do we once again identify them on the map?
Yes. They'll be identified on the map. Just the question is, do these words seem in line with what you're all thinking? Or did we miss something? You know, maybe there's other, I'll make this a little bit bigger just in case. I know sometimes it's hard to read on Zoom.
Well, any improvements that involve stormwater rates obviously needs to function properly with bikes. I think that's done regardless, but I don't know. It needs to be stated.
That is usually a requirement now, Chuck.
Yeah, that's what I was. So maybe we don't need to muck it up and add to it.
Okay, so moving on then to green energy. This is the last category, infrastructure. So we still have working with Pico, who owns the 66 acres. We still have the aim for the village to be potentially, you know, a solar or the township.
So is it a little bit funny that the title is green energy, but then we're talking about green infrastructure and stormwater? Is that the same? Would
I guess we can add it as green infrastructure and energy.
yeah, something more than energy. I don't know what the word is, but something more than energy. Greenwashing.
Right, greenwashing. Good point. So this talks obviously about all the different types of green that you could look at. I don't know if these are all the different types you want to look at.
I want to add in there soil preservation or somehow. Every time we have a rain and I watch all of our soil washing down the White Clay Creek, I think something's wrong with this. Like something's, well, I guess that's stormwater. You have it as stormwater. That's good. But soil
I'll pile on, Paul. I mean, I think adding soil in there with the water.
I mean, it's
erosion. Yeah, that's it.
It's soil management, but one of those is erosion control. Yeah, it's like having the farmer grade or plant across the hill instead of up and down the hill, you know, just simple things like that, or having bales in front of a construction site so they're not washing out mud every time it rains.
They are required. They just don't always stay there.
I know. And I'm not picking on my neighbor, but he's the worst. So,
Wait, so you were also talking about the word green infrastructure. I think it was Jerry in our first meeting. I think the word that's missing here is sustainable. Is sustainable in this section at all?
how about instead of green, we just say sustainable infrastructure energy? Would that be better?
Yeah, I mean, Jerry said that in our very first meeting and I like fist bumped.
Yeah.
Jerry, where are you, Jerry?
Yeah. I was also looking at the word types after green infrastructure. Do people understand what that means?
Where are you?
Right in the first, what was the first line? Consider and promote the use of green infrastructure type.
Just get rid of types. Doesn't add value.
So is this the only place where sewer is mentioned? Because I just feel like it's mentioned elsewhere. We do a whole section on it, right?
This is one of the places it's mentioned.
But
Yeah, this isn't the only place it's mentioned. This is one of the places.
I don't think sewer would be considered green or sustainable. It's its own problem.
Sewer's not sustainable. That's kind of funny.
Well, I guess how it
I
could be
just-
considered sustainable is if you do recharge, the groundwater recharge and drip irrigation, then it becomes more of a situation where, you know, you're putting it back into the water table in a clean form.
I want everyone to see my dinner came, so excuse me.
Beautiful.
And then also discharge directly into streams, you know, if it's not properly taken care of first, can be a problem.
Is that, Janine, is the Westchester, is that a ground pumping? Like, I know that they have a waste treatment plant. Is that pumped back into the ground or is that surface discharge?
Westchester Borough or Westchester?
Westchester, the city.
Westchester Borough. I'm not sure if it's entirely stream discharge or if it's pumped back into the ground. I know part of it's stream discharge, but I don't know if it's 100%.
The EPA gets involved with the surface water discharge, and actually that's because it's exposed to the sunlight and the oxygen. That's usually safer in the long run at this point for anything over 10 housing units. That's where the effluent is being treated. The old idea of pumping it back in, I think that's really frowned upon these days. But anyway, in terms of the green energy sort of thing, it's you know, I don't know what this comment is just directed at. Okay, we don't pump the effluent usually down into deep wells like we used to. It's kind of surface discharges. I think the EPA's way to go.
Well, I think drip irrigation is a big one also. In another community I'm working in, they actually favor drip irrigation because after it's, you know, cleaned, et cetera, then it's going back into the, you know, right into the ground, and they're not having to worry about this potentially massive flow.
It's a complicated issue, that's for sure. And if it's treated twice and oxygenated, then yeah, it can be just as good. But it's a complicated issue.
I'm just saying, I think, you know, there's differing opinions on what is best, but certainly it can fall under the sustainable situation. And I think it's important to talk about it under sustainability because you want to make sure people address it as another sewer done wrong can cause a lot of problems. We'll just put it that way. So
100%
done in a sustainable manner.
100% agree. And I agree with it needs to be a sustainable sort of treatment because fresh water is a major resource, just as much so as a view of a bunch of trees. So it's definitely a very important sustainable infrastructure. And it is complicated, that's for sure. It has to be done right.
Yeah, and one of the things I think of as sustainable infrastructure would be permeable parking lots and stuff like that as we go forward.
Yeah, that's a good one. As
The,
much permeable surface as you can have.
That's
So,
what-
we have to
that would just
convince-
be under stormwater management.
we have to convince our engineer that that's okay.
Yeah, he considers them permeable.
what?
I mean,
He considers what permeable?
No,
anything like gravel or anything like that.
Okay.
So if you have those permeable pavers with gravel in between, he considers it a hard surface.
Oh, okay. So that's not,
You don't get much credit for it, is my point. It's like
okay, yeah.
40% permeable or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the philosophy there is after you drive on it long enough, it degrades
Compacted.
to the point where it becomes compacted.
Correct.
So it really has to be maintained, which most of
the-
us don't know, wouldn't do. That's not something anybody would think of doing. So how does
So
everybody
maybe
feel about
we-
the other draft recommendations before we move on in this section?
So is that why roads is in here?
Yes,
Because they potentially could be done to make them sustainable?
yes. And they directly relate to what we were talking about. It's tough to talk about stormwater management without talking about roads because roads really contribute. Generally, most communities contribute to the most amount of stormwater issues
Mm-hmm.
because, it's so much impervious surface coverage. So they really go, hand in hand.
Okay.
And there's, different technologies that are being developed for roads, for example, that as Kathy was saying, if we're thinking 2030, 2040, there's ideas of solar roads, which are being developed in places in Europe. Who knows, by 2040, maybe all roads will be made of permeable, surface and not impermeable surface, particularly in areas that are prone to flood. I think there's other,
We're going to
other
have flying
technologies.
cars by then.
What was that?
We're going to have flying cars by then.
Right, we might have flying cars by then and we don't need roads at all, right? We'll be the Jetsons.
Well, the cars will be self-driving.
Ah,
Yeah.
We'll have hover vehicles like in Star Wars. The
Yeah,
first.
I had some wordsmithing on A there for your draft recommendation.
Uh-huh.
At the end of the first sentence, I didn't see why we needed and needs and accessibility.
Continue to reassess how to support and encourage use of alternate, including evolving technology and innovations and needs and accessibility. I guess we don't.
And then on the second sentence, I would just say, consider creating a township sustainability and environmental advisory committee, period.
Okay. Okay, does anybody else have any other comments about these recommendations? And then we will move on to the prior section. Let me know after you've read them. I don't want to move the screen.
go ahead.
So the prior subject area is resource protection. And we started to talk a little bit about this last time. Resource protection as green infrastructure in the township. getting at that the resources aren't just pretty, but they actually serve functional means. Water resources, again, in the survey and particularly in the community input meeting, came up as something that was very important. So we have these recommendations related to water resources, and then we group the rest of the natural resources together. And last time, you guys had asked us to include lawns and pocket meadows in this recommendation. So between natural resources and water, is there anything else in these recommendations that we should change or improve or add? Or are they garbage recommendations and we should just go in another direction?
I don't know what you meant by garbage, but
What was that?
what do you mean by garbage recommendations?
Oh, I was just being funny.
Yeah,
Just
okay.
saying if you don't like them, at all.
Yeah, I think actually we are our own worst enemy. That's always true. I know I like to blame other people, but I am my own worst enemy in most cases. And we do a lot of damage on our own properties with the way that we treat the land, with insecticides, with herbicides, with the development that we all have on our quarter acre, half acre, whatever it may be. So if we could improve the personal responsibility aspect in terms of resource protection, that people take ownership of their responsibility to maintain their environment. It's not somebody else's responsibility to show sustainability. It's our responsibility. And so that's kind of what I meant by the pocket meadows and lawns and things like that, that we shift our mindset a little bit.
Barry makes a good point. Is this a good place to put something about education? Because a lot of it could just be that people don't understand how to do what Barry's mentioning. Do we want to do an educational aspect to the recommendation?
Yeah, it could be something as simple as this article in the newsletter or a workshop when we can talk to each other again.
We can give them an EIT tax break from the new 0.5% tax.
If they attend, right?
Do we need to look at our current ordinances and take out the ordinances that fly in the face of this thinking, because we definitely have things in our ordinances that, like I said, wouldn't allow for pocket meadows.
I know you can get 90 days.
Really? 90 days for not cutting the grass?
That's right. It's a 90-day imprisonment. It's pretty serious.
Wow.
To Joan, I don't know if she's going to do anything. Maybe
We don't even have a jail.
If you're
But,
not
I
on
mean,
call, Barry, I'll send you a cake.
With a file inside.
With a file inside. I would just like to make one comment. I've been attending webinars, seminars, all across the state about turning your lawn or at least part of your lawn into a meadow, habitat, whatever. And I'm working very closely with our pro chair, Greg Sachs, who's really into this. Our goal is to hopefully have a class in the spring for residents that are interested in doing this. There's a little bit of grant money out there, not much, but I'm looking into that. I think I'm taking another webinar this week about it. So it's a goal, and I agree with you, Barry. I didn't realize our ordinances need revision. So we all this should be done at the same time, but it's an education process. For example, you have a meadow, Barry. My next door neighbor, he just stopped mowing his lawn. God love him. I love him. He's a wonderful person. He thinks he has a meadow. He doesn't have a meadow. Our goal is to try and educate our residents. Here's what a meadow is. It'll take a little time. It'll be gorgeous. But meanwhile, Joan, they're going to be calling the township office and saying, my neighbor is not mowing their lawn. So
They
we're
already
working
do.
on it. I think this is a really good goal, but it's going to take a little time. It's an education process, and I'm trying to do it, and in conjunction with Greg Sachs, who knows a lot more than I do about it and has a lot more connections. But I think we can get there eventually. I really do. So that's the goal, a little bit at a time.
And how about in that sentence you have there, pesticides, herbicides, repair, how about composting in there too?
Yeah, all of that. All of that. We just, Paul, I participated in a webinar. I forget who did it, but they did the Hershey Medical Center, and they took all this mowed lawn, hills, and they converted it into meadow, forest, stormwater management area. And they estimated their saving. It was amazing. It was like $125,000 a year. Now, we're talking 50 acres. But if we could just educate people, do you have any idea how much money you can save? Because if you want a beautiful green lawn, you have to put herbicide, pesticide, you got to water, you can't water if you're on a well. And that's kind of the direction Greg Sachs and I are trying to go in. Let's go for education. And I'm counting on you, Barry, because you got meadow experience. And I think we can do this over the next couple of years. And not everyone, but some people. And it's going to help our stormwater management, bottom line, which could end up being extremely expensive for our township. So I think this comprehensive plan will drive that issue home. So I hope it does.
So,
yeah.
Mary, I like where you're going. And to Chuck's point, we have a lot of ordinances against it, but the HOAs also have ordinances against it that we don't control, but maybe we should. The HOAs require, spick and span. You can even plant a vegetable garden in several of our homeowner association areas. But then
that's a good point, Paul, because if we're going to really have an agriculturally defined township, then we have to have friendly HOA ordinances and deal with the fact that, look, we're going to have a rural identity with agriculture, and you guys can fit in or
well,
development.
I don't know what we can do about the ones that are already there, but maybe we can.
Yeah, you can change them. Yeah.
But what my point of the HOAs though is many of them are really negligent in caring for their HOA open space. They're just letting the invasives and the vines and the mile a minute take over, and no one cares for it or looks at it or does any effort to maintain the open space.
Well, and I guess, Paul, it boils down to education.
Yeah.
We need to educate people, because I think a lot of people that live in our area, they come from Delaware or they come from Delaware County. They don't have big grass areas like we do here, and they want a beautiful lawn, but they don't realize what a beautiful lawn entails. And then they realize, I can't water this darn thing and it won't survive if I don't water it. So it's all about education. And that's from, even with these HOAs, I hope we can educate them that this is a better way to go. You know?
Actually, I think, Paul, you have more than, Mary, you have education, but the ordinance that says you have to mow your grass or you go to jail, for 90 days, you can change that and say, look, if you have an open space with invasives that's not cared for, you can be fined. And that's perfectly legitimate, because that costs everyone when you don't maintain areas and you propagate invasives, because those seeds are crazy. So it's partially also legislation that can control invasives and have people do a better job with their open spaces for the HOAs. Just an idea.
I agree, Barry. It's all, we have to work it all together.
It can be legislation.
The HOA documents often will say how things have to be maintained and how that is policed. Other communities I work with, they actually have landscape architects or other on retainer who review those HOA documents, and then every so many years go out and see if the HOA documents are being met, because the documents are legal documents. It's not it's not suggestions
I
when,
think the problem is, so in our latest developments, we did pretty good saying how to maintain the open space, but in the older ones, so 99% of them, we had no say or no input, and we have no mechanism to enforce it.
okay, so there's no documents then, like what I'm addressing in the older ones.
Yeah, but I don't think that we should go to the point where we're encouraging the use of herbicides to do the management. That's the easiest thing to do, is to just kill the plants with an herbicide.
No, I wasn't referring to that, but it's a good point. Yeah.
The concept of invasives, because I just let my property grow to a forest. Virtually everything that grew was originally considered an invasive, so it's a pretty difficult thing to avoid, because invasives, it's a rolling process, and there's hardly anything left that, I mean, you could plant things that were originally here, but so many invasives have come through, and then the next invasive comes through and takes that out. So it's a lot more complicated than just saying keep all the invasives off.
Yeah, I agree, because the developers that put in the pear trees, and we've got a bunch of volunteers on our property. I'm trying to get rid of them, and also the tree of heavens.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, generally, we refer to the Penn State Extension as the reference, which we have listed here, because they keep a tally and an up-to-date tally on what they consider tiered invasives. So, there's invasives that maybe grow a lot, but they aren't necessarily doing any specific damage. And then there's other invasives that are doing damage to other plants, like certain vines that are killing other plants. So they have a tiered approach. And
yeah, I had this discussion with my wife this afternoon. Anything that's not native technically is an invasive. And I think what the discussion was talking about were the vines and things like that, not necessarily trees and some of the shrubs that we may want to have.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Chuck has a good point. The question is, what period do you go back to what's native? That's always the question. When did things start becoming invasive? And again, I think Penn State does a pretty nice job of categorizing, I guess I'll call friendlier plants to our environment and less friendly plants to our environment. And friendlier plants allow other plants to grow as well. And less friendly plants don't allow other plants to grow, to be very simplistic about it. But that's more or less how it's broken down.
I like
You'll
that.
put that in, because that's a great idea, and also help the township, I think, with any sort of ordinance to say, look, if this is a class 4 drug/invasive, you can't use this thing.
No purple liatris, right, Barry?
Okay. So then, are we good to go here? We'll move on to the next topic. And that is open space preservation. So continue to support, and this was specifically written, the words that are used here are specifically written to know that the township is not in the business of necessarily having another open space tax, but more in the business going forward in the future of how they can assist open space preservation, more open space preservation, whether it's to be, kind of a conduit, or just to keep eyes open of who may be interested in open space preservation and helping to supply them with information for how that can be done, that sort of thing. So that's how this is generally written.
At this point, I'd just like to point out that it's 8:30 and have a feeling from the task force whether we want to continue or whether we want to go on with this at our next meeting. Janine, what's your feeling? People, it's getting late and people are getting tired. Go on or say goodnight and start again when we get back together.
I have to go. I have something due for tomorrow morning that I've got to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Okay, why don't we just wrap it up then? And we will put this in green.
So we'll
where to
start
start
here.
next time.
So we'll start here and also start to talk about,
Actually, I'll put it in blue.
you know, what I've learned about, you know, land and all that sort of stuff. So we'll start talking about zoning, hopefully.
Okay, you'll have your interview summary, hopefully. We just have one more. We just have the agricultural interview to set up now. That's the only one that hasn't been set up yet. And all the other ones have been set up and or done. So we'll have that summary to you already.
So that's me, but I don't have contact information for either person. So I guess Kathy's one.
Kathy's
and-
one and Dave Hawkins is the other.
Yeah, I mean, does anybody have his cell phone?
Yes,
Who does?
we'll send it to you.
Yeah, and Paul, I'm around. I was going to talk to you about this tonight. I'll find you on email.
Okay.
Great.
When do you plan to have next month's meeting with Christmas coming in there?
We've already scheduled it. It's December, hold on.
I think it's December 15th.
The 15th, I think. yeah.
So. I
Yeah,
think so.
December 15th.
Yep.
Janine, thanks for your patience.
I think this was a good meeting. You're very welcome. Good meeting, lots of good conversation.
All right. Well, then I guess we'll say goodnight.
Okay,
Happy
good night, everybody. Happy
Night.
Thanksgiving.
Yep. Same to
Yep.
you.